All right, we are back, and I'm with Ryan Westwood, the CEO of Fullcast. So you were just telling us the story about how you got your first bigger size business off the ground, 150 employees, and then you, I assume, sold that business, and then it was.
We started a new company called Simplus.
Mm-hmm.
And Simplus was an amazing ride. And it was another iteration where we got better and smarter. And we used that thought process of using a channel partner, just like I talked about those internet service providers. This time we partnered with Salesforce.com. And we received funding from them. We figured out how to use them as a channel, how to partner with them, how to align. And we scaled the business. It was 0 to 600 employees in 6 years.
Wow.
We sold the company for $250 million to Infosys. It was an outstanding outcome.
That was also all Utah, right?
It was all Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I ran the business for just over 2 years at Infosys. It became a juggernaut. It's a big business, and that practice at Infosys now employs thousands of people, and we introduced Infosys to Salt Lake City. So, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we were able to bring a big Fortune 100 company to Utah, and we created a lot of jobs and continue to. It was an exceptional opportunity to scale a business and be a part of a public company. And then I took over a year off, and now I'm doing Fullcast.
Nice. And so where did you initially see the need or the niche for Fullcast?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I've lived through the early stages of building a business, the first couple million, so many times that we were like, okay, we're very happy to write our own checks and skip this step and buy a business that is succeeding, that we think that with our team, we could really ignite something incredible. Mm-hmm. So we bought a business in Seattle and moved its headquarters to Salt Lake City. Existing business, software company, providing territory management software. So imagine you're a big company, you got 1,000 salespeople, and you say, okay, we've got this 1,000 salespeople, and we've got to figure out how to maximize their time and their opportunity. How are we going to do that? What are we going to have them sell? Where are we going to have them sell? And what industries are they going to focus on? And how do we maximize the revenue opportunity with the number of salespeople we have? And right now, you have over, depending on what studies you look at, 40 or 50% of salespeople in these companies are not achieving their quotas. There's a lot of salespeople that aren't achieving quotas because of a failure by the businesses to structure and set up their opportunity. Mm-hmm. We're going to solve that and create opportunities for salespeople to achieve their goals at a higher rate and solve for and maximize revenue in these big companies. And that's what Fullcast is going to do in the software that we've acquired and moved to Salt Lake.
So when you look at Salesforce, which is I would assume it's the leading CRM in big sales operations.
Yep.
And you look at Fullcast, how do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, so we're focused on how do you build out a territory? How do you actually break it down, and how do you manage leads? Where Salesforce is much more managing customer data, and it's a CRM where we're focusing on a niche or an area and really your go-to-market. We think that we're very complementary to a Salesforce.
Oh, okay.
Probably
you're not
something
competing against them. You're complementary.
In some ways we are, and in some ways we're complementary. My view on this is, a company like Salesforce would benefit heavily from having something like Fullcast.
Oh, okay. Are you looking to possibly be acquired?
No. I think that I've been down that road before. Mm-hmm. We've done it a few times. I want to create a big company here in Utah that employs a lot of people. I feel like my life has been leading up to this point. I told you it's been 32 years. I've obsessed over how to create companies. And I look at it right now, and I have co-founders that in their own rights could all be CEOs. They're incredibly talented. I'm so fortunate to work with them. One of them, my brother, lives down in Draper. Amy Cook, who's in Southern California, and then Lance Evanson in Seattle. My co-founders I've worked with for a long time. They're brilliant. I'm lucky to work with them. And we all have had exits and created businesses. We're not doing this to create a small business. We're talking about building a big company for a decade that endures and employs a lot of people in Utah.
That's cool. And so if you're a sales manager and you've got a team, at what point would you say you need a software like Salesforce or
At least, Salesforce, I say right out the gate. For Fullcast, I say you need to have about 50 salespeople.
Okay.
At that
so you're
point,
looking at bigger teams where
Yeah.
you're looking to optimize every little aspect of the territories and leads and things like
That's
that.
right.
Yeah. When you look at the tech scene in Utah and Silicon Slopes and what the state's been doing and how we've just got this booming tech economy, what would you attribute that most to?
It's such a fascinating question. There's a lot of things. I think we have some excellent universities that contribute with IP, that have some incredible entrepreneurship programs. If you look at those programs, I'm really impressed by the master and business creation at the U. I think that the U, BYU, Weber State, their sales program, I mean, we got some universities doing some things that are really impressive.
Yeah. Did you go to university?
I went to UVU.
Okay.
It was a great experience. But I ultimately think that that's one small element. The other element to it is, and this is kind of an interesting thing that I don't see in other ecosystems, founders and entrepreneurs that have had some degree of success in Utah are not afraid to back other founders. So in other environments, I see it being more competitive in that way, where they're like, they're not as likely to back each other. I've had a lot of founders and names you might recognize that have backed me multiple times and supported me. And I really appreciate it. And so what I've done is I've invested a lot in dozens and dozens of tech companies in Utah to support the next generation of entrepreneurs. So not only do we have a much bigger ecosystem of venture capital now in Utah, I mean, it's magnificent, the difference from a decade ago for an entrepreneur to raise money in Utah. I can't even tell you how much higher their odds are. But you also have a truly unique community led by Clint Betts and Silicon Slopes that supports each other. And when you have, like me, when you have entrepreneurs willing to cut checks like the checks they've cut into Fullcast. I mean, Todd Peterson, the founder of Event, didn't have to take one meeting with me and tell me here's $1 million. But he did. And that's what I think is making Utah unique, is we're supporting each other, and we kind of have a chip on our shoulder, I think, of like, we realize we're underdogs. And so we help each other.
That's cool.
And see the bigger picture.
Yeah. You look at, Lehigh and you see these buildings that have just popped up, and you see Podium's now got 2 big buildings, and then Adobe's campus, and then you'll go down the road and there's Ancestry.com and eBay.
Yeah.
It's like, it seems like a lot of the impetus is moving out of California and moving to places like Austin and Salt Lake City and Vegas and other places. Do you think that that's due to the environment, the tax burdens that exist in California, or more than the incentives that exist in these other places?
There's a lot of, I think it plays a small part in it. I think people think it plays a bigger part than it does. But it is a very advantageous place to do business in Utah. Ultimately, it comes down to the entrepreneur's ability to execute and the capital they have access to. I think the government's role in it. I think that there was a program in Utah called TCIP years ago that I really thought was pretty great. It helped a lot of entrepreneurs out with capital. Ultimately, in Utah, you just have a much more mature ecosystem than 10 years ago. You have lots of billion-dollar exits, lots of them in the last 10 years. Not just a handful, not just a dozen, but lots. And you mentioned Adobe. I mean, if Josh James didn't create Omniture, Adobe wouldn't be here, and those beautiful buildings wouldn't be here, and that didn't exist not that long ago.
Yeah.
So we now have a lot of exits. We now have a lot more capital, and we're in a position where we can really do some magnificent things in tech and leave a mark on Utah in general.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about the generational development of the ecosystem, because I remember when WordPerfect, I still am,
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when
Yep.
WordPerfect was such a massive entity.
Yep.
And then you had Novell,
Novell. Yeah.
and those two were just the behemoths. And then you saw Microsoft basically put them both out of business.
Yes.
Because they
Yep.
incorporated both those products into their suite.
Yep.
And then you kind of thought, well, man, this is going to be devastating, but it wasn't really at all. You might even say it was a blessing in disguise, because the people who came out of those businesses went on to create amazing things.
Yeah, some of the people involved in those businesses are now the venture capitalists that are the future of supporting Utah's entrepreneurship. One of the things that I think entrepreneurs need to realize in Utah is how fortunate we are. We're so fortunate because of those stories you're talking about, right? If I really think about how fortunate I am, you have those tech companies that came before that made a lot of people wealthy, that then created the venture capital, that then created the angel investors, that then supported my company. And so ultimately, when entrepreneurs show up in Utah on the scene and they have a fundraise of $3, $4, $5 million, they should recognize that 15 years ago, entrepreneurs were flying to the Bay, going to Sand Hill Road, and knocking on doors because there were very few options here. And now they can do all that right here in Utah. We have all those options.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that I think maybe some entrepreneurs, that history you're talking about, the history of what brought us here, I think it's really important to understand that, to really understand how we got here and why we're so fortunate.
So the last question I want to ask you, I'm going to say for the last segment, it's, say you're a budding entrepreneur, you got a great idea, how would you best go about getting some seed capital? So I'm going to ask that on the flip side. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back.